Dawn breaks over the plain outside Nisibis like a wound reopening. The sun does not rise cleanly. It bleeds upward through dust and smoke, its light dulled by the haze of yesterday's killing. The ground is dark in places where blood has soaked too deeply to dry. Broken spears lie half-buried in churned earth. Shields, dented and abandoned, catch the first light and reflect it weakly, as if ashamed to shine. The battle has already begun again. Men move through the grey half-light, stiff and silent, stepping around bodies that were alive when the sun last stood here. Some of the wounded still breathe. Their voices carry low, hoarse sounds that drift across the field and vanish into the dust. No one stops. There is no time left for mercy. Behind the Roman lines stands Marcus Apellius Macrinus, Emperor of Rome. He does not wear the confidence of his predecessors. No purple arrogance, no divine certainty. His cloak is plain, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the distance where Parthian banners sway like dark birds against the horizon. He listens, not to speeches, not to prayers, but to the sound of an army preparing itself for another day it may not survive. Macrinus knows this ground is unforgiving. Nisibis at his back, open plain ahead, no hills to soften the clash. The Parthians have space to move, to circle, to strike and withdraw. His own legions must hold, they always must hold. Discipline is the only thing standing between Rome and collapse. A horn sounds. It cuts through the morning air, sharp and final. Orders ripple forward, passed from officer to officer, shield to shield. The Roman line tightens. Helmets settle. Hands find familiar grips on wood and iron. Fear is present, but it is buried beneath training drilled into muscle and bone. Across the field, Parthian cavalry begins to stir. Horses stamp and snort, restless under armored riders. Cataphracts gleam faintly through the dust, steel-clad men mounted on steel-clad beasts, built not for subtlety, but for impact. They have come for blood, they have come for vengeance. Yesterday proved nothing. Neither empire bent, neither broke. Today will be worse. The air grows hotter by the minute. Flies rise in black clouds from the dead. Somewhere near the front, a Roman soldier vomits and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. Another mutters a prayer he no longer believes will be answered. Macrinus exhales slowly. This is only his second day as a battlefield emperor. The throne he seized through murder now demands payment in lives. Victory might save his reign. Defeat would end it, and perhaps end more than that. The horns sound again. The space between the armies begins to close, and on the blood-soaked plain of Nisibis, as the second day begins, two empires step forward, knowing only one truth with certainty: there will be no easy ending. The war does not begin at Nisibis, it only arrives there. Macrinus knows this as he watches the line form, knows it in the way the men avoid looking back toward him, in the way officers hesitate before shouting his name. Power clings to him, but loyalty does not. He wears the title of emperor, yet the weight of it is still unfamiliar, heavy in the wrong places. Only weeks ago, another man ruled Rome. Caracalla had marched east with violence in his blood and Alexander on his mind. He spoke of conquest, of glory reborn, of Parthia reduced to a memory. His soldiers followed him not because they loved him, but because he paid them and fed their hunger for plunder. Then, on a lonely road near Carrhae, ambition ended in the dust. A blade found his back. The emperor fell without ceremony. And from that killing, Macrinus rose. Not a general hardened by decades of command, not a prince shaped for rule, a bureaucrat, a fixer, a man who understood law and logistics better than legions and war cries. His elevation was swift, improvised and soaked in fear. The army needed an emperor immediately. The empire could not wait. Parthia did not wait either. It crossed the frontier. Artabanus IV watched Rome devour itself and saw insult layered upon insult. Roman armies had crossed into his lands without cause, ravaging villages, desecrating royal estates, retreating only when the emperor who ordered it lay dead. Apologies followed, excuses, promises of restraint. They were not enough. Artabanus did not march west for land. He marched for balance, for honor, for the certainty that Rome could still be made to bleed when it overreached. The old rivalry, decades of skirmishes, treaties, betrayals, tightened into something personal. Nisibis became inevitable. The city squats on the frontier like a locked gate, Roman walls rising behind Macrinus's army, Parthian plains stretching endlessly before it. Whoever controls this ground controls movement, trade, and pride. But for the men standing here now, strategy has narrowed to a simpler truth. There is nowhere to go. If the Romans retreat, Parthian cavalry will devour them in open ground. If the Parthians withdraw, the campaign ends in humiliation. Both sides are committed, not by choice, but by circumstance. The armies feel it. Roman soldiers shift their weight, aware that they are too far from home to fail. Parthian riders tighten reins, knowing that delay favors no one. Every hour burns supplies. Every sunrise hardens resolve. The battlefield is not yet loud, but it is tense, stretched tight as drawn sinew. Orders are given in low voices. Movements are precise, controlled, rehearsed. No one rushes forward. They are waiting. Waiting for momentum to tip, waiting for fear to crack, waiting for the storm they all know is coming, because it has been building for years, across borders, across reigns, across broken promises. At Nisibis, history has compressed into a single, unforgiving space. And once it breaks, it will not be contained. The first charge comes without drama, no great roar, no sudden collapse of silence, just movement, measured, deliberate, unstoppable. Parthian horse archers advance at a steady pace, spreading wide across the plain, their formation loose where the Roman line is tight. Dust rises under thousands of hooves, turning the morning light into a dull, shifting veil. Then the arrows come. They fall in hissing waves, darkening the air, rattling against shields and helmets. Some find gaps. Men cry out and fall, trampled before they finish screaming. The Roman line absorbs the odor, wood shuddering, iron ringing, discipline holding where panic wants to break through. Centurions shout, standards remain upright. Macrinus watches as his infantry does exactly what it has been trained to do. Shields lock, lines compress, gaps close almost as soon as they appear. The machine of Rome grinds forward step by step, refusing to scatter, refusing to chase shadows. The Parthians test, withdraw, then return again. Feigned retreats pull Roman auxilia forward, stretching the edges of the formation. Cavalry darts in and out, loosing arrows at close range before wheeling away. Every movement is calculated to provoke pursuit, to unravel the order that keeps the legions alive. It does not work. When the cataphracts finally commit, the ground trembles. Armored horses surge forward in dense ranks, steel on steel, riders lowered behind lances as long as small trees. This is not harassment. This is impact. The distance between the armies collapses in seconds. The Roman front braces. The collision is brutal, intimate, deafening. Lances shatter against shields. Men are hurled backward, crushed under horseflesh, pierced where armor fails. The line bows, but it does not break. Legionaries stab upward into bellies and joints, dragging riders from their mounts, finishing them in the dirt. For a moment, only a moment, it seems one side must give way. But neither does. The Parthian charge loses cohesion as bodies pile up, horses scream and rear. Riders disengage, pulling back into open space where they can breathe, regroup, survive. The Romans do not pursue. They reform, bloodied, exhausted, still standing. Hours pass like this. Advance, clash, withdraw, repeat. The sun climbs higher, burning away the morning haze and replacing it with heat that presses down on armor and lungs alike. Thirst becomes a constant ache. The dead begin to outnumber the wounded. The living fight on, because stopping would mean joining them. By late afternoon, both armies have spent more than they intended. Casualties are heavy on both sides. Commanders expected movement, decision, collapse. Instead, they have gained only attrition. Strength has been traded for nothing resembling victory. As evening approaches, the fighting slows, not by order, but by exhaustion. Men stumble back from the line. Horses are led away, trembling. Weapons are dropped and picked up again because hands no longer respond as they should. The ground between the armies is unrecognizable, churned into mud and flesh, marked by the paths of repeated charges that led nowhere. When darkness finally claims the field, no trumpet announces an end. The battle simply pauses. Day 1 has decided nothing, and that may be the most dangerous outcome of all. Night does not bring relief. It settles over the field like a lid, trapping heat, stench, and sound beneath it. Fires bloom across both camps, small, controlled points of light surrounded by vast darkness. They do not warm the men so much as remind them how exposed they are. The wounded lie where they fell. Some are dragged back by friends or servants, their armor torn away, their bodies shaking as blood seeps into the soil. Others remain between the lines, too far to reach without inviting death. Their cries drift across the plain, rising and falling with the wind, impossible to ignore, and just as impossible to answer. Roman surgeons work until their hands cramp. Knives flash. Limbs are cut away without ceremony. The pile of discarded armor grows higher than the pile of discarded flesh. Wine is poured into mouths and onto wounds, for courage and for cleansing, though it does little for either. In the Roman camp, discipline holds, but barely. Men speak in low voices, counting the missing, naming the dead. They glance toward the emperor's tent, measuring a man they do not yet trust. Macrinus has not proven himself in victory. He has only survived a single day of failure without collapse. Inside his command space, maps are spread, then ignored. The truth is obvious. Supplies are thinner than they should be. Morale is brittle. The legions have held, yes, but holding forever is not a plan. If tomorrow brings another day like the first, Rome will bleed itself into weakness. Macrinus listens to his officers argue in careful tones. Some urge caution, others demand aggression, a decisive push to break the Parthians before confidence erodes completely. No one speaks of retreat. They all know better. Across the field, the Parthian camp hums with different tensions. Their wounded are fewer in number, but no less severe. Cataphract armor is pried open like coffins. Horses are tended with more urgency than men. Without them, the army ceases to exist. Riders clean arrowheads by firelight, their faces expressionless, conserving energy for dawn. Artabanus does not celebrate. He had expected movement, fear, Roman disorder. Instead, he has met a wall, old, stubborn, painfully effective. The legions refuse to chase, refuse to scatter, refuse to panic. Each hour spent grinding against them costs Parthia elite cavalry it cannot easily replace. Yet withdrawal is unthinkable. To leave now would turn a campaign of vengeance into a confession of weakness. The frontier would remember. Rome would remember. So Artabanus waits. Between the camps, the field belongs to the dead. The moon rises and exposes everything. The twisted bodies, the broken lances, the shapes that do not move no matter how long they are stared at. Scavengers creep close, then retreat. Even the animals sense that this ground is not finished with killing. Somewhere near the Roman line, a soldier stares at the sky and wonders if the gods can still see this place. When sleep finally comes, it is shallow and fractured. Dreams bleed into memory. The sounds of battle replay themselves uninvited. Dawn is already forming beyond the horizon, and everyone knows that when it arrives, mercy will not come with it. The second day begins without ceremony. No pause for speeches, no ritual exchange of signals. The light spreads across the field, and both armies move as if pulled by the same invisible command. Fatigue lingers in every step, but it is sharpened now by urgency. Day 1 proved endurance. Day 2 will test limits. The Parthians change first. They do not strike the Roman center. Instead, their cavalry fans wider, stretching the battlefield until the legions seem smaller against the open plain. Horse archers ride in long looping arcs, loosing arrows from distances just beyond comfort, daring the Romans to respond. Some do. Auxiliary units edge forward, shields raised, eyes locked on retreating riders. The pursuit is cautious at first, then longer, the temptation growing with each apparent success. Parthian riders fall back again, too smoothly, too willingly. Macrinus sees it and feels the unease tighten in his chest. The Roman line begins to thin at the edges. Orders snap, standards shift, officers shout themselves hoarse, trying to keep cohesion as the field widens and control weakens. Discipline is still present, but it is strained, pulled in directions it was never meant to go. Then the Parthians turn. Cataphracts crash into the extended Roman flanks with devastating force. The impact is sudden, violent, and precise. Shields are driven aside. Men are crushed before they can reform. For a moment, panic surges, sharp, dangerous, contagious. Roman centurions react instantly. They throw men back into formation, plugging gaps with bodies, sacrificing units to stabilize the line. The advance halts. The legions absorb the blow the only way they know how, by refusing to move backward. The fighting tightens. What was once open ground becomes a series of brutal knots, each one a small battle of its own. Swords replace spears, arrows are loosed at point-blank range, horses rear and fall, trapping riders beneath their weight. The air fills with dust, sweat, and the metallic smell of blood. The sun climbs higher, turning armor into ovens. Men fight with mouths open, gasping for air that no longer cools. Water is rationed, passed forward in skins that feel too light far too quickly. Bodies are shoved aside without thought. There is no time to grieve, no space to remember names. Still, the Roman center holds. Each Parthian assault bleeds strength without gaining ground. The legions bend, but they bend inward, tightening rather than breaking. What Artabanus hoped would unravel instead becomes more rigid, more stubborn with every hour. Losses mount, especially among the Parthian elite. By midday, even victory begins to look expensive. Macrinus stands amid the chaos, caught between possibility and disaster. A push now might turn resistance into collapse, or it might shatter what control remains. He weighs lives against outcomes, reputation against survival. By late afternoon, the tempo slows again. Not because orders are given, but because the men can give no more. Attacks lose their sharpness. Movements grow heavier, less precise. The field is littered with signs of overreach. Broken formations, fallen standards, exhausted horses kneeling in the dust. When evening comes, it brings no resolution. 2 days of battle have passed. 2 days of blood have been spent. And still, nothing is decided. The third morning rises quietly. No horns, no immediate movement, just the sun creeping over a battlefield that no longer looks like land at all. The plain outside Nisibis has been trampled into something shapeless. Mud mixed with blood, weapons embedded where they fell, bodies stiffening where no one bothered to move them. Both armies hesitate. It is not strategy. It is fatigue. Men stand in silence, leaning on shields, gripping weapons with hands swollen and numb. Armor is strapped on again out of habit more than readiness. Horses refuse to move until kicked or coaxed, their sides heaving, foam dried white along their mouths. When the fighting resumes, it lacks fury. Parthian cavalry advances more cautiously now, their movements tighter, their charges shorter. Roman formations adjust with less precision, relying on instinct, where command once guided every step. The battle has entered a different phase. Not one of ambition, but of survival. Arrows still fall, but in thinner volleys. Blades still meet, but without the same force behind them. Every clash feels heavier than the last, not because it is more violent, but because there is nothing left to spend. Men fight knowing the truth, even if they cannot say it. No breakthrough is coming. The Parthians can no longer gather the mass needed to shatter the Roman line. Too many horses are dead. Too many elite riders lie scattered across the field. Each attack now risks losing what cannot be replaced. The Romans, for their part, cannot advance. Their discipline keeps them standing, but pursuit would mean exposure, long, disordered movement across open ground where Parthian arrows would feast. Victory, if it comes, will not come by force. By midday, the battlefield settles into grim repetition. Skirmish, withdraw, reform. Wounded men crawl away if they can. If they cannot, they are stepped over. The living barely register them anymore. Compassion has been burned out by necessity. Macrinus watches and understands what his officers have not yet voiced. This battle cannot be won here, not decisively, not without risking everything. Rome will survive this field, but it will not dominate it. The cost of pressing further would be higher than the reward, and emperors who gamble everything rarely live long enough to regret it. Artabanus reaches the same conclusion from the opposite side. Honor has been satisfied. Rome has been tested and found unbroken, but not invincible. Continuing now would mean grinding his own strength into Roman shields until nothing remains. As the afternoon fades, the fighting slows to a crawl. No signal marks the end. Men simply stop advancing. Space opens between the armies. The distance grows not because one side retreats, but because both allow it. By sunset, the field is silent again. 3 days of blood have passed, and the battle ends not with victory, but with exhaustion, the kind that reshapes empires more quietly than defeat ever could. The silence after the fighting feels unnatural. It stretches across the field, broken only by the movements of the living as they begin the grim work left behind by war. Men step carefully now, not from caution, but from numbness. The battle has ended, yet the ground still seems hostile, as if it might rise again and demand more blood. No army claims the field outright. Roman standards remain standing. Parthian banners still fly beyond reach. Both sides send out parties to collect their wounded and their dead, watching one another closely, hands never far from weapons. Even in stillness, trust does not exist. Among the Romans, the truth spreads quickly. They have not lost, but they have not won. The legions held against everything Parthia could throw at them. Discipline triumphed over shock. Order survived mobility. In another age, another reign, that might have been enough to declare victory. For Macrinus, it is not. He walks the lines, offering measured words, careful praise. The soldiers listen, but their eyes tell him what their mouths will not. They want certainty, reward, a reason these 3 days mattered. He can offer none of it yet. What he sees instead is cost. Cohorts reduced to shadows of themselves, veterans gone, replaced by frightened men who learned too quickly what survival demands. Supplies lower than reports admit. An army that can still fight, but cannot afford another Nisibis. Across the plain, Artabanus counts his losses with equal severity. The Parthian dead are not easily replaced. Cataphracts are not raised overnight. Horses trained for war take years, not months. The Roman line did not break, and every rider lost to it is a wound that will linger long after the field is cleared. Honor has been defended, but at a price that limits what comes next. Messages pass between the camps, cautious, formal, stripped of threats. Neither side speaks of conquest now. The language shifts toward settlement, toward closure, toward survival without humiliation. Negotiation begins not because peace is desired, but because further fighting offers nothing but ruin. When terms are finally shaped, they favor no one. Rome agrees to pay, heavily. Silver to soothe Parthian pride. Concessions to turn rage into restraint. Macrinus buys time with coin, trading wealth for stability, prestige for breathing room. Artabanus accepts. Not as submission, as calculation. The frontier remains where it was. No banners are planted, no cities change hands. On maps, the world looks the same. But maps do not show what has shifted. Nisibis has proven that Rome can still endure, but no longer intimidate at will. Parthia has shown strength, but not dominance. The balance holds, but it trembles now, stressed by the knowledge of what continued conflict would cost. When the armies finally withdraw, they do so slowly. The battlefield is left to the dead, the dust and the silence. The earth will absorb what remains. It always does. 3 days of blood have ended without triumph. And in that uneasy outcome, something far more dangerous than defeat has taken root. News of Nisibis travels faster than the armies themselves. Messengers ride west, carrying carefully chosen words, reports polished to hide uncertainty, victories implied rather than claimed. In Rome, the Senate listens, measures, and waits. The city has learned to read between lines. When an emperor announces survival instead of conquest, the meaning is clear. Macrinus returns not as a conqueror, but as a man who avoided disaster. The legions remain loyal, for now, Pay still flows, order still holds. Yet something essential has thinned. He is an emperor born of necessity, not destiny, and Nisibis has not changed that. It has only delayed the question of how long such a reign can last. Within the army, respect is conditional. They trust his caution more than his authority. He preserved their lives, but he did not give them glory. In a military empire, that absence lingers. Soldiers remember who leads them to triumph and who merely brings them home. Parthia absorbs the outcome differently. Artabanus returns east with honor intact, his position strengthened by resistance rather than conquest. He faced Rome directly and did not yield. Songs will be sung of riders who broke Roman ranks, of steel crashing against shields, of a frontier that still holds. But beneath the pride lies awareness. The cost was too high. The Parthian way of war, speed, mobility, elite cavalry, met its limit against Roman discipline. The empire remains powerful, but the margin for error has narrowed. Each future clash will demand more, not less. Nisibis becomes a lesson neither side announces aloud. For Rome, it is a warning that expansion without unity invites reckoning. That emperors without roots must purchase stability instead of commanding it. The legions can still hold the world together, but they cannot decide who deserves to rule it. For Parthia, it is a reminder that Rome is stubborn, not brittle. That vengeance satisfies honor, but does not reshape borders. The frontier will not fall easily, no matter how fierce the charge. Between them, the land remains contested, tense, unfinished. Traders resume their routes cautiously. Fortresses repair walls scarred by time and neglect. Garrisons watch the horizon more closely than before. Peace exists, but it is thin, stretched tight across memories of what nearly happened. Nisibis does not enter history as a conquest. It enters as a threshold, a moment when two ancient powers met their limits, recognized them, and stepped back. Not in reconciliation, but in preparation, because both empires now understand the same truth. The next conflict will not be fought the same way. The field outside Nisibis empties slowly. Wind moves through it first, lifting dust from the scars left behind. Then birds return, cautious, circling before descending. What remains of the battle is absorbed into the land, iron rusting into the soil, blood darkening and fading, names dissolving into silence. The world moves on, but the men who survived do not forget where it paused. For Macrinus, Nisibis is not an ending, it is a delay. The silver he sends east buys him time, not loyalty. In Rome, whispers grow. An emperor who pays for peace invites questions. An emperor without a decisive victory invites challengers. The legions may have saved him on the battlefield, but they will not save him forever. Far from the frontier, the consequences begin to unfold. Power shifts quietly. Ambition stirs. Others watch and learn that emperors can fall suddenly, that the purple can be taken, that survival is not the same as legitimacy. The lesson of Caracala's death still hangs over the empire like a shadow. In Parthia, Artabanus holds his ground. But the strain shows. The riders who died at Nisibis will not return. The horses cannot be replaced quickly. Strength remains, yet it is no longer limitless. Beyond the horizon, new pressures already form, forces that will test Parthia from within as much as from without. Nisibis does not announce these futures. It merely makes them possible. 3 days of blood did not redraw borders or crown heroes. They revealed fragility, of emperors, of armies, of the balance that kept the East and West from tearing each other apart. History often turns not on victories, but on moments when momentum stalls. Here, between Roman walls and Parthian plains, two empires reached forward and felt resistance instead of collapse. They stepped back, not in defeat, but in recognition. The hinge has turned. What follows will be shaped by this pause, by caution replacing arrogance, by calculation replacing fury, by rivals preparing for a reckoning delayed, not denied. At Nisibis, the war does not end. It waits.